So I'm going to go over my process for how I choose what to glue together and what not to glue together prior to filling, sanding, painting, etc. We're going to start on this EE-3 blaster for Boba Fett on the most fiddly part. These parts are incredibly small, and they are the smallest things I have ever printed on my printer and then assembled. So I have my reference photos. I'm lining up all the parts, making sure I have everything in the correct order. Did I mention these are tiny? Yeah, tiny. This is a piece that is going to be incredibly hard to paint individually and then assemble without messing up the paint. So this is a piece I do want to have as assembled as possible before going into the paint booth. And I do apologize, there's going to be a lot of fast forwarding and a lot of sanding. These 3D printed 3mm dowels had to be shaved down ever so slightly, so I'm using 120 grit sandpaper to layer by layer get it down so that I can squeeze these tiny pieces in the right order. Here is the reference photo. You can see where it goes on the barrel and it goes over the barrel. So this piece also has to maintain a certain curvature and a certain amount of spacing, where these individual pieces will be glued onto the barrel itself, but this tiny apparatus has to fit around it exactly. So after messing with it for lots of time, I finally get it to where I can get things in the right spacing, in the right order. And once I'm able to do that on one side, I do a light tack with CA glue so that I don't lose that space. Once I get that spacing down, I do go ahead and move on to the other side, and again, a lot of sanding, making sure the dowels are in place. And what I do at this point is, again, I've got that curvature. I don't want things so tacked down with glue that I can't adjust it. So I take the barrel and I'm constantly going back and making sure the curvature is correct. This is going to be important for the final fit at the end. And we're still not done with this little fiddly part, so bear with me. We have this final piece on the end, and this is a good example of why you dry fit everything before you glue. Because if you look very closely at this piece, one of the insertion points for the dowel is misformed. So I'm taking a pair of nippers and going in there and reshaping that just a little bit so that the dowel can slide in there. And there we go. We finally have this well shaped and formed, and we go in and tack everything down so that it doesn't move. And all these pieces here are going to be the same color, and they are put in the bin to be painted the same. Next, we're moving on to the scope section. One thing to look for when you're combining pieces are smooth, long pieces that have multiple joints. I tend to always go ahead and glue those pieces together because most likely you're going to have a seam that is filled. one of the seams on here is covered by a detail piece, the other really isn't. So after assembly, make sure that the glue doesn't drip, and we'll sand this down and fill it with UV resin. However, I did make a mistake and glued this before I had all the parts on it that were supposed to be on it. So, yay, I have to reprint it. Yay, more tiny dowels. These are 6mm dowels. They also need to be sanded. I went ahead and cut most of that out of this video, but there were still some very small parts that needed to be lined up exactly. This is the mounting bracket for the scope to the barrel itself. And what I also want to do is, before I tack everything in place, I want to make sure it's going to sit on the barrel itself the way it's supposed to. So I start gathering those parts together and seeing where it's supposed to line up. And I'm glad I did this because it gave me a much better idea of where things are supposed to go, how things go on here. Marko's very good about his designs, and there's actually a couple of places where the print snaps together so that the glue is doing its job, but there's at least a little bit of alignment help so that you know things are where they're supposed to be. Tack this down with glue. And we're going to move on to the main barrel here in just a second. Oh, except for, this is at the point where I realize I missed this piece that's supposed to go on the main body of the scope. Oh well, moving on. Pulling all the parts out for the main body of the blaster, I am separating into what pieces will be painted the same color. We've got the upper and lower part of the blaster as well as the stock. The lower part is all the same color, the upper part is silver and black, and then the stock is wood grain. And I'm just going to start by combining pieces that I know can be combined, and we'll go from there, looking for seams, looking for anything that might need a little touch up. But again, this is a mystery maker file, and a lot of the seams are already covered with detail pieces to make it more seamless. I do a dry fit of both the trigger and the stock mount. They are the same color as the lower portion of the barrel. However, it's just going to make it a little bit more awkward to paint, so we're just going to keep them off for now. And here we have the lower section with a lot of the detail pieces on. It's really lovely detail work that Marko put into this. Onto the main portion of the barrel, it looks like I'm missing a few pegs, so we'll have to wait on that. But here we go. We have all the major components of this blaster ready for priming and paint.